Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Empathy Effect webinar. I'm Niels Neudecker, Managing Director at Human Aid in North America. I'm based in New York City, hometown of the New York Knicks. Go Knicks! And today I'm joined here by Angie and Delphine, who are Senior Director and Global Client Partner at Human Aid. And both are experts in helping brands really step into the shoes of their consumers, or in other words, feel empathy. Over the next 45 minutes, we will explore why empathy is getting harder, what this means for how organizations understand people and make decisions, and how you can bring this thinking into your own work and brand context. And also, please don't hold back any questions. So you will see a chat tab and a question tab on the right-hand side. And you can post questions there at any point, and you can also upvote questions from others that feel most relevant to you. And we will answer as many as we can live, either in the chat or during the Q&A at the end. And finally, don't forget the emojis. Feel free to use them to react, agree, or simply show what's resonating as we go along. Okay, so let's dive right in with this campaign of the dating app Bumble, launched with one confident line: "You know full well a vow of celibacy is not the answer." The reactions were immediate. People were in shock and disbelief, and many called it tone deaf and asking if this is the death of online dating. So what happened? Bumble tried to tap into the frustrations of modern dating, but they started from their own assumptions that sex is simply part of dating, while for many people it isn't. They reduced something deeply personal and complex to a very simple answer. So the learning here: when you oversimplify people, you stop connecting with them. But Bumble isn't the only brand that stumbles. And I would like to invite you to travel back in time a little bit. I think you probably all remember the excitement of 2021 when Mark Zuckerberg announced that the metaverse is the next frontier in connecting people. People putting on headsets, stepping into virtual worlds, imagining endless possibilities. But for many, that excitement didn't last because the virtual world never found a home in people's daily life. And that reality hit hard. Tech giants like Meta poured billions into virtual worlds while mass adoption never came. And the problem wasn't the technology, it was that companies didn't fully understand that people, or the people they were trying to reach. And the majority of consumers simply don't see a meaningful role for the metaverse in work, play, or social life. And it's a pattern we see again and again. Companies are designing for what they think people want, not what people actually feel or need. And the lesson is clear. A brand or an entire industry can drift when empathy isn't part of the design. And this disconnect doesn't only show up in campaigns, it also shows up in who we see and who we don't see. And let me share an example with you how people actually feel.
I don't feel like I'm spoken to very often. You know, I watch television, go to the cinema more than anything else now, and I certainly don't see any advertising that's largely aimed at me. I feel it's always aimed at a younger audience, and probably an audience that probably hasn't got as much money as me. And if there is an advert aimed at me, like a cruise advert, it's always some awfully attractive couple walking on a sandy beach dressed in white linen pointing at a cruise ship. And it's just so stereotypical and so bland and so drab that it washes over me. But they don't advertise to me in a way that excites me in my stage of life either. So.
Okay, those awfully attractive people. So this clip shows us something simple but powerful. I don't feel like I'm spoken to very often, he's saying. And he's not alone. So 57% of people older than 50 feel undervalued or even ignored by brands. And this is strange because the 50 plus population will account for 60% of global spending power by 2050. But to many marketers, they are almost invisible. Only 5 to 10% of marketing budgets are focused on reaching them. So what's going on here? The challenge is people shaping brands don't live the lives of the people they're trying to reach. They don't step into the world of silvers. And when you don't see people and you don't speak to them, they quietly disappear from your thinking. And that distance can grow even further. So if you think about it, the average marketer is aged 25 to 35, and the average advertiser is even younger, which makes it even harder to step into the shoes of silvers. And as a result, millions of people feel unseen, resulting in a blind spot worth trillions of US dollars. And sometimes the problem isn't who we don't see, it's what you don't see changing. For years, Gucci was one of the most desired luxury brands in China, and it was a clear symbol of status and success. But that started to change. Sales slowed, and the brand began to lose relevance among Gen Z. And Kering, Gucci's parent company, took its hardest hit since the financial crisis in 2008. So, what happened? Culture moved, but the brand didn't. Young consumers are turning to high quality, lower priced alternatives. It's a shift known as pink tea. So for them, status is no longer about showing what you have, but about expressing who you are. But Gucci kept speaking the old language of logos, status, visibility, and they didn't sense what was changing and didn't step into the new world. So over time, the brand lost its place in people's lives. So for brands today, it's easier than ever to make mistakes. And even the most well-resourced brands stumble. What lies at the heart of these missteps is not a data problem or a strategy gap. It's something much more fundamental and human. It's a lack of empathy. So let's start with defining what empathy actually is. It's the ability to step into someone else's shoes, to understand and feel the world as they experience it. But today, this capacity is under pressure. Across society, there are growing signals that people feel less heard, understood, and seen. And recent research even shows that people rate AI responses as more empathetic than those of human experts. So something is completely wrong, and it's a systematic issue. So let's take a step back and look at what's broken in our system. And we work with our cultural strategy partner, Space Doctors, which is part of Human Aid, to identify two causes for our empathy problem. It's empathy fatigue and an empathy deficit. So let's start with the fatigue. Just thinking about how you start your day, many of us start with taking our phone and starting being bombarded with information. And in fact, the average person receives more than 150 notifications each day from Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, and so on, and news flashes about war, climate crisis, disasters. So one after the other. And at first you feel something, but over time it becomes too much. And this fatigue turns into numbness. So people are turning out, and around 40% say they actively avoid the news because it feels emotionally draining, not because they don't care, because they can't carry all of it. But that doesn't mean people stop feeling altogether. And I assume many people have heard about Punch. Recently, a video of this abandoned baby monkey started circulating online. He was tiny, alone, dragging a little plush toy behind him. And within hours, millions of people had seen it. They shared it, reacted to it, and you could feel the wave of emotion. And for a moment, that little monkey had the world's attention. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, it faded. Not because people didn't care, but because something else took its place. And that's what empathy fatigue looks like. It's not that we don't feel, but we can't carry it all. So we become more selective and choose when to lean in and when to tune out. And we still feel, but just not for long enough to truly put things in motion. And there's also a second force at play, the empathy deficit. In a fast digital world, we interact more than ever, but often more superficially. We never take the time to pause, to truly listen, to step into someone else's world, and over time, that weakens our ability to relate. So a study from the University of Michigan even mentions that there's a 40% decrease in overall empathy scores among college students compared with cohorts from 20 to 30 years earlier. And we also see this in the way people are dating. There are endless profiles, but we take just a few seconds per decision, swipe left, swipe right. And as one Gen Z research participant told us, we are just throwing out lines. This is diminishing the value of being in a good relationship. And it doesn't stop at dating. We see the same shift in everyday communication. A growing number of Gen Z actually avoid phone calls, not just because they prefer texting, but because real-time conversation feels harder. There's no way to quickly check via AI what's to say next. It's just two people talking on the phone in real time. And for many, that feels highly uncomfortable. So we are caught in attention. On one side, we feel too much to keep connecting. On the other side, we don't connect deeply enough. And together, these forces create distance between people and between brands and the people they serve. And next, Angie will share with us what that means for companies and brands.
Awesome. Thank you, Niels. Welcome, everybody. So let's make this really concrete. I want you to think about the last time you truly connected with a real consumer. So not through a dashboard or a report, but in their actual world where you're seeing what they're seeing, feeling what they're feeling. If you've had a moment like that, we would love for you to pop something into the chat to help us understand those experiences if you're willing to share. So for most organizations, that moment is really rare. So research is showing us, at best, it might be twice a year where these occurrences are happening. And we all know people suffer from social desirability in surveys. So if they're being really honest with us, it's probably even less than that. So we know that it wasn't always like this, though. In the past, merchants interacted directly with people. They saw them, they understood them in context, right? And that was the essence of marketing at the time. Now, when we think about today, we're working in large office buildings, maybe even in our own homes, oftentimes miles away from the real consumers that we're serving. And so much of that connection is mediated through screens and through data. And while those tools can really be powerful, they also create that distance that is concerning. We want to fill that gap. Of course, the introduction of AI, and we're in the thick of it, it's only made things more challenging for us. And it really does give us the illusion that we do know everything, but in fact, we're also not understanding much at all at the same time. So we can be, again, very flooded with data, those dashboards, journey maps, behavior tracking, but that data gets fragmented and it tends to be very rational. So the question comes, do we really know our consumers? Now, again, not what they click, but how they're living, how they're feeling, and what's driving their decisions. So again, for many organizations, that deeper understanding is a missing component. And we know that we can't rely on our own experiences to bridge that gap. We know it's a simple truth. You are not your consumer. So there was an Australian study conducted recently that shows 40% of people in Sydney who are in the agency environment live in the city or the inner city compared to just 4% of the general public. So that's a difference, of course. So yes, you might think your consumers live a bit like you do, but in reality, many live very different lives. And the more distance there is, the easier it becomes to get things wrong. So again, think about Bumble, think about Meta. And that's exactly why market research exists. So we have a place here to bridge that gap, to bring those decision makers that you work with closer to the people they're serving and to the culture that they move in. But let's be honest for a moment. How close does it really bring you? So again, we know today that most organizations are not lacking data in any way. We've done the research, you do the segmentations, you have the personas, you know what people want, what they buy, what they click, and we're surrounded by that data constantly. But it's disconnected and often grossly stripped from context. So instead of bringing you closer, it's actually keeping you at a distance. You're data rich, but often still searching for real foundational understanding of people and the culture in which they move. And even when you do have insights, the question still remains, is that enough? So the short answer, of course, it's no, because insights are informing, but empathy offers that place where we can translate. So without empathy, data stays abstract. It's really easy to analyze, but it's also really easy to ignore. And so empathy makes it real. It's what makes you feel it, what makes you sense it. And that's what helps create that sense of urgency. So again, what motivates people to act, sparking new ideas, for instance. So in essence, when we think about empathy, it's really about empathy being a catalyst for creating movement. So the other thing that's interesting here is we know this just isn't a soft idea. The impact is actually really measurable. So brands that systematically cultivate empathy see measurable returns. They're 60% more profitable, growing 1.4 times faster, and realizing 1.6 times higher customer lifetime value. So the impact is there. And here's the good news. Empathy isn't fixed. So social neuroscientist Professor Jamil Zaki shows that we can train our empathy muscles. It's a skill, something that we can build, strengthen, and scale, which means the very thing that's under pressure today can become a real strategic advantage for tomorrow. So if empathy is a strategic advantage, and we believe that, how does it actually take root inside an organization? So the organizations that succeed don't implement empathy overnight. It's not just something you turn on. They build it in layer by layer until it becomes part of how decisions are made every day. And so it often starts small and then it grows. So I want to hand us over to Delphine, and she'll share some really great examples about how you can do just that.
Yes, thank you, Angie. So there are different ways for you to grow empathy in your organization. You can see them here listed on the screen, and I will take you through each of them a little bit more in depth in the next couple of minutes. First of all, empathy can only grow into your organizations if you invest in the basics first. So you have to empower people by building the right skills. Empathy starts at an individual level. People need to learn how to truly listen, how to move beyond those surface level observations, and how to translate what they hear into meaningful insight and action. We often see at companies that people and teams are very much trained to analyze, but not to understand. Many teams are data literate, but empathy poor. And investing in building empathy as a skill will help you to close that gap. When Reckitt aimed to humanize their consumer insights and also increase the actionability of their insights, we co-created a global hybrid training program. So we combined online and offline sessions. In total, we trained more than 250 marketeers and CMI professionals on the importance of consumer centricity, the role of insights, and how to drive action from insights. And what worked very well in our approach is that we linked the training to real business challenges. We did that by immersing the teams into the consumer world through sharing consumer stories from the Reckitt reality and working on live business cases. So instead of learning what a good insights looks like in isolation, we immediately started to develop fresh insights from real consumer stories for their own brands in their own context. And along the way, you see that things start to change. Not only we created an aligned understanding and language around insights and how to fuel the business from insights, we also saw that the teams felt more confident to turn understanding into action. The second thing that you need to know about empathy is that it can only create impact if it flows through your organization. So in fact, training your teams on how to come to good insight is only the beginning. The real challenge is about ensuring that your insights land in the organization. Because what we see is that in many organizations, insights get stuck in decks or in platforms, and they are only consumed by a few people. If you want to make sure that your insights travel through the organization, you need to translate them into formats that people can engage with. So you do not need to create more information, but more connection. And insights can take many formats. If you want to reach large groups, you can think of a poster campaign, infographics, video stories, or even playbooks. For a workshop, you could consider more immersive and interactive tools such as a consumer museum, a board game, a quiz exposing the say-do gap, or even just bringing in consumers into your workshop to really foster that deeper understanding. At the end of the session, you could also provide like empathy artifacts, like an empathy goodie bag, to help extend the impact and the memory of insights. And what all these formats have in common is that they are all created and curated with a clear intent and an audience in mind. And that is what makes them so impactful. And that's why they help to make insights flow faster into the organization. Curating stories is also what the teams here in the US do for Coca-Cola. As a strategic partner, we help the CMI team to transform complex research and other data sources into compelling narrative tailored to different narratives, tailored to different audiences. And as a result of that, what we see is that insights start to shape conversations, they inspire teams, and they even help Coca-Cola to strengthen its partner collaborations. A great example of that is what Coca-Cola did at CinemaCon. CinemaCon is the world's largest gathering of theater owners, and as a sponsor of that event, Coca-Cola was asked to host an educational seminar. And for that, we joined forces with the CMI team, and we created a compelling narrative that combined consumer research, cultural trends, as well as business opportunities. And we turned that into practical strategies for how to drive traffic with Gen Z moviegoers. And this story did not only help Coca-Cola to showcase its deep expertise and strong partnership within the industry, we were also able to bridge the gap between cinema owners and their audiences. A third thing to do is to make sure that you deepen your insights, that you deepen your empathy through experience. Because understanding people from a distance is not the same as experiencing their reality. Empathy becomes much more powerful if you let your teams step into the worlds of the people that they serve. They need to see their environments, observe their habits, and hear their stories firsthand. And you can do that through consumer and cultural immersions. Cultural immersions will help you to uncover the broader currents that shape behavior, while consumer immersions will help you to understand the lived reality of daily choices. And both are essential because it's in those immersive moments that it becomes harder to stereotype your consumer, to reduce them to a data point, because those immersive moments, they add texture, nuance, and context. And it's also the moment when empathy shifts from being something that is rather abstract to something that is becoming embodied. It becomes meaningful, and it's the moment where bold and meaningful ideas can emerge. Bold and meaningful ideas is also what we were after when we organized offline immersive shopper safaris for Samsung Home Electronics here in the US. We did that prior to an ideation session on how to future-proof the retail experience for Samsung. For that, we organized a full day of immersion with the team, cross-functional teams. We kicked that off by an insight download on recent journey work and next to outlining the business challenge. And after that, the teams were asked to go out in the streets of Manhattan, in New York, and to experience themselves 3 to 4 out of the category retail locations as a shopper. So we asked them to immerse in the retail environments, to observe how other retailers are creating meaningful experiences for their consumers and how they help shoppers to navigate complexity and to make decisions in store. And the idea of these shopper immersions was really to open up the chakras, to inspire that out-of-the-box thinking by really stepping into the shoes of the consumer. They all collected observations that they thought were inspiring or striking, and by the end of the morning, we had more than 250 retail observations made by the teams. And these observations were then taken into a workshop in the afternoon, where we mapped all these observations on an experience framework, and we also discussed implications. By the end, and then we went into ideation, and by the end of the day, the teams had created more than 80 ideas on how to improve the retail experience. We also asked the teams to pitch their best ideas so that we could get some first prioritization on the next steps and how to move forward. And it's important to realize that empathy is not only important for teams that are close to consumers, such as sales and marketing teams, but it's also important for teams that are further away from the consumer, such as R&D, digital teams, leadership teams, even tech teams. And that is something that Haleon takes at heart. Haleon is a world leader in consumer health and working for brands like Excedrin, Voltaren, and many more. And what we did for Haleon is we connected their R&D and innovation teams directly with consumers and healthcare professionals across the globe in key markets over the course of 15 weeks, and that to really fuel human-centric innovations. Prior to the connects, we trained the Haleon employees to confidently lead the sessions and also to get the most out of the time spent with the consumers and the experts. We equipped the teams with conversation guides, and after the sessions, we regrouped and transformed all those consumer and expert stories into emotional springboards for future ideation, and in the end, better and more relevant innovations. So, after you have built capabilities around insights for your team, and you have enabled fast and smooth flow of insights across your organization, and you have deepened the insights through experience, you will see that things start to shift. You will see that empathy starts to shape everyday decisions. Teams will ask different questions, they will challenge assumptions more actively, and empathy will shift from something that you do from time to time to something that shapes everyday thinking across functions, across teams, and across seniority levels. And that's also the moment when empathy will no longer be dependent on individual effort or isolated initiatives. No, it will sustain through structures, in programs, in ways of working. It will become embedded in your workflows. It will become part of who you are as an organization, part of your DNA. And that's also what happened when L'Oréal introduced Beauty Talks, their global Consumer Connect program. We started working on that program back in 2020 because L'Oréal felt the need to boost their consumer centricity and to really level up their game by moving from consumer understanding to consumer empathy. We were also at the beginning of the pandemic back then, so it felt even more important than ever to stay close to their consumers. And that in the response to their very dynamic and ever-changing beauty categories that they are operating in. And I would like to share you now a short promo video that we created back then to create or to boost awareness and excitement around the program amongst the global stakeholder group at L'Oréal. Yes, and it's by keeping that constant finger on the pulse, that by doing that continuous sensing and embedding empathy into your business processes and decision making, like L'Oréal did, that it will become a strategic advantage over time. Stakeholders will start to notice that. They will start to see the value and the impact of all these collective efforts. And that is also something that we saw confirmed in the latest impact survey that we did around the program, in which we measured the impact of empathy amongst, in the meantime, more than 4,000 stakeholders onboarded. And I think that we can say, with a score of 8.5 out of 10, that L'Oréal teams across the globe recognize consumer empathy as instrumental to brand growth, instrumental to brand success. And although we leverage, of course, technology and AI to scale and socialize empathy in the program, the real power of the program lies in putting stakeholders in direct contact with different types of audiences. And whether you do that through a series of online connects as part of your development process, or during offline empathy events around strategic themes such as sustainability, Gen Z, or even festival makeup looks, as you can see here pictured on the screen, it is in that human-to-human connection that the magic happens and that things start to move. It's through collecting and sharing those human stories that people do not only get energized and excited around insights, they also feel the urge to take action and to drive positive change. Now, what do we need to take away from all of this, Angie?
So if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. So to move people with your brand, you have to be moved by them first. So again, not just by their data, but by their reality, their emotions, and their everyday lives, of course. So how do you do this? One part of the answer is something that we call sensing. So you don't need another snapshot of your consumer, but rather a continuous sensing of what's happening in people's lives and in culture around them. So it means keeping your antenna up, staying really open, paying attention, and continuously tuning into what people feel, what they need, and what they experience. And it's, again, training that empathy muscle. So it's not a once a year, twice a year kind of thing, but ongoing as a habit. And as Delphine has shared, this can really start with small steps. It can be something like installing a consumer connect session, or maybe many over time. But the idea is you can grow this into a full program over time. As Meralda Dirks from L'Oréal puts it, sensing consumers and getting in touch with their emotions enables us to deepen the relationship between our brands and consumers. So second element of this is humanizing. So yes, we've all invested heavily in AI, as we've discussed. So it's in our automation, it's in our dashboards. But without that human context, it's easy to accept everything that AI tells us as fact, and without questioning it and without seeing what's missing. So humanizing is what we see as the antidote for that. So it's about adding color to the data. It's seeing the stories behind the numbers. So let's not only think about those small fragmented pieces of research, but how you can include that more profound foundational approach to things. And when brands start humanizing, something really starts to shift. One of our clients said it very simply and very well. It brings us back to earth. Back to what really matters, back to real life, beyond the slides, the dashboards, and the assumptions.
Okay, thank you, Angie and Delphine. And now before we jump into all of your questions, we would also really appreciate a bit of feedback. So on this slide, you see a QR code. And if you have your phone handy, we would love you to scan the QR code and answer 3 short questions. Your feedback genuinely helps us to prepare and shape future editions of this webinar. So thank you in advance for taking the time. And while you are submitting your questions and we are reading through the questions, I will answer some of the questions we often get asked, also in previous webinars. Question number 1 is, most of your examples were consumer brands. Does consumer empathy matter just as much in business-to-business environments? And do you approach it differently? So to the first part of the question, yes, of course, empathy is about staying close to key audiences. And the approach is very similar in business-to-business. So you put stakeholders in the direct contact with the people they serve. So for example, in the Haleon and the L'Oréal example we shared today, we connected stakeholders with both consumers, but also healthcare and beauty professionals. Then, Angie, one question for you. Many organizations are under pressure to be more efficient and data-driven. How do you build a business case for investing in empathy and consumer closeness?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and something a lot of our clients wrangle with in terms of how to just get started. And sometimes the answer with with this is just get started, right? And so do something like start small. And, that can be something like starting with a pilot. It might just be with one team or one small component of a business unit, for instance, or maybe even a selected set of stakeholders. So you might have a stakeholder who, maybe has that natural empathy gene, get them involved. And maybe it's one key market that you're focused on or key segment. And it doesn't have to be an ongoing thing. It could be a pop in and a pop out focused on some limited time. So from what you build in that case, it allows you to then scale more broadly across the organization. And honestly, a lot of what we've seen is there's a lot of excitement. Someone mentioned in one of the comments earlier, this is a really fun part of the process, getting close and bursting that bubble. And so when people see that excitement, it's certainly something that you can leverage in this pilot sort of approach. It's really a good way to fine tune as well. So sometimes the idea of biting off a giant empathy program might feel overwhelming to an organization. If you take that more piloted approach, it will allow you to fine tune and make sure you're finding kind of your path that's the fit for your company and culture when it comes to finding empathy.
Great. Thanks, Angie, for sharing your
of course.
perspective. Delphine, here's a question for you. If an organization recognizes that it has become too distant from consumers, what's the first step you would recommend?
Without doubt, I would say organize an empathy event. Put your stakeholders in direct contact with consumers and with their audiences. Let them meet and talk in a speed date, or take them out in a retail safari or a shopper safari. You can also organize in-home visits, because it's in those events and when creating an experience around those events that you feel that people get energized, and that you really see that they want to take action and that they want to change things. So, and it can start off as something that is a one-off, but it can also evolve into a series of events, and eventually it can become something more structurally, potentially. But that's a great way to give your stakeholders like a first taste, the first bite, and you can start building the business case from there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Delphine, for sharing. I see that we have participants typing in questions. While we're waiting for the typing of the questions, Angie, did you see, or Delphine, any questions that you want to answer?
I think we're waiting for this one moment to come in now. What I will say as one of our participants is taking, I've actually got a team that's been in field last week and this week, getting close to a certain group of consumers that is very different from our client group and client organization in terms of just some differences in the way that their lives have come together. And it's been such a powerful experience to hear from the field, just the meaning and the importance of reducing that distance, right? And the experience of your life as a marketer and an insights pro, and what might be going in the lives of a particular consumer. So just want to kind of jump in there with some live, very recent and fresh action out in the field. So it's always super powerful to see those moments come together. All right, I am looking and I am not seeing a couple of those questions come through just yet. If there are any additional questions from the team that's online with us, we would love to take a peek. I do see some typing, so I don't want to jump out of here quite yet until we can see this question. I'm very curious, I have to admit.
Okay, so while we wait for that question being typed, for sure, any question that you can also send to us directly. So if you didn't have the chance to type down your question in all detail, please send us an email. We are happy to provide an answer, and so don't hesitate to reach out to us. So with that, we will have a last look if that question came in. Okay, here we go. So the question is, I'm curious how you know when a brand truly understands its consumers versus when it's just reacting to data or trends. What sort of sign do you look for? Angie, Delphine?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can jump in on that one. I think it's a couple of things that we look at. I appreciate that you stated that you're a student. First of all, thank you for raising your hand and coming in with a question. I think part of it is, we all have to be students of our consumers in a way, right? And so to make sure that we are, looking for those signs, honestly, it is getting us in these moments with people, right? And so Delphine shared examples of consumer connects, where that's a moment where our clients and people that we work with are able to partner closely with people, like whether it's a consumer or a physician group, let's say, or whatever it might be. Having that conversation firsthand, you kind of have your spidey sense up and you can kind of just feel it, right? And so getting in those moments where you do have that chance to feel what's happening, I think is really important. We're also looking at things like culture. And so our partners at Space Doctors are really looking at those cultural trends that are happening out in the world. And so those could be things like metaphors in the category that you're working within that might apply, or brands or experiences that are close in or adjacent, or maybe even really far out, that could help to solve for a challenge that you're looking at. So again, we're looking for other signals in the world and the way in which people are behaving that can help cue us in to different ways that we're reacting to getting closer to consumers. Niels, Delphine, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because we are in a world where more and more companies use similar tools and similar data sets. And the question is also about trend reports. A lot of trend reports are available online. And if you using same data, same tools, the challenge is that you're creating the same the same brand, and everything starts to feel the same and starts to feel beige and boring, right? So therefore, sometimes it's about going away from that and having aha effects from this empathy with consumers that you get by really being really close to consumers, by really understanding their stories, by understanding the emotions that they went through along a certain experience, right? And you often don't get that from those trend reports, and therefore, if you have the feeling that whatever you read in your data, it's just repeating what you already know, maybe that's a good time to think about if you want to be a little bit closer to consumers and understand what's really happening to them in this world. Okay, I see we're like a few seconds from the end of this webinar. I would like to thank everyone for joining today. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to us, and then speak to you soon. Thank you.